Readers read stories to experience that great character transformation. So to see the character go from where they start at the beginning of the book to where they end at the end of the book. Now, typically it's a positive move, but it doesn't have to be. So the character can go from good to bad and bad to worse. Okay, so that an example of that is the character from the TV series Breaking Bad, where he starts off as just a regular guy, he's a regular teacher, and then he ends up becoming a criminal that puts his family and his own life in danger. But most of the time, the characters, it's a positive transformation. So they're going from fear to courage, let's say, right? So they start the novel where they're afraid of everything, but by the end of the novel, they are courageous and brave. Or they might start where they're lacking love, and then they move to a place where they're able to accept and give love. They might be incompetent at the beginning of the story and then be very successful by the end of the story. So that is the positive transformation, and readers like the positive transformation because it gives them hope, right, for a good world. So today what we're going to talk about is that transformation, and how do you achieve that? How do you take your character through this transformative experience, and also your reader along with the character?
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Amante channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author, and I'm also here to give you tips on Fridays to help you with your story. Okay, the challenge for writers that are trying to create this transformative experience for a character is to make it entertaining, right? So how do we do that? How do we make this an entertaining experience for the reader? And the answer is that we're taking the character and the reader on a journey. And the journey begins with something that happens, right? We have that inciting incident at the beginning of the story. So we have this life-changing event that happens and sets the journey in motion. In the case of Breaking Bad, what is that change that happens? The main character, Walter, finds out that he is going to die, that he has cancer. And what does that do? That makes him fear for his family, right? Because he feels like he's going to leave them with an inability to take care of themselves in debt. This event, this change, launches the character into having to make a decision. And so the decisions that he makes, he takes these action steps throughout the story that ends up changing his life and takes him on this transformative arc. So the decisions that he makes is, well, he decides that he's going to start selling drugs, creating and selling drugs, because he thinks that this is a way to get a lot of money fast. He doesn't have a lot of time to live, so he wants to do this quickly. So without too much thought of what he's getting into, he decides to do this, right? So he takes these action steps to learn how to create the drug. Once he learns how to create the drug, he takes more action steps to learn about the business and how to sell and how to deal with all these other criminal people, all the criminal element out there. And it just keeps building and building and building, where he is taking action, making decisions that lead him deeper and deeper into this new life that he's creating for himself. And the thing is that he's changing, he's becoming a different person on the outside, but he's also becoming a different person on the inside. So these steps and these decisions that the character makes changes his external and his internal life. And that you need to show that, because that's the way that you're going to show that the character is transforming. So these internal changes that are happening within the character are changing him, are transforming him into a different kind of person. So what does this look like on a flowchart, right? So we have this initial change that causes the character to make the first decision. Then he takes some action steps that leads to a new decision, and more action steps that lead to another decision, and so forth, right, as you're moving through the story. And these decisions are creating that internal change, and that internal change leads to the transformation. So hopefully you can see that on a little graph. I will post a blog where I did write about this so that you can look at it. and read it. So let's talk for a minute about that change. Okay, so that's that very first thing that happens, that inciting incident that we see in many plotting, the hero's journey and many of the plotting structures that we've talked about in the past. But so let's talk about the change. The change has to be dramatic enough that it enables the character to make an important decision. So if the change isn't big enough, it's not going to be a dramatic enough story. So it needs to be a big change. So for the character Walter, he definitely has a big change, right? He finds out he has cancer and he's going to die. That changes everything. It changes everything, the way he thinks about life. It changes his daily routine of going to work and teaching, because what's the point of doing that? And at this point. So the change has to be major, and it has to be able to launch the character into a different world, and to force him to make an important decision. Now let's talk about the decision. So the decision has to be an actual decision. So if there's only one choice, right? If we're only giving the character one choice, there's no decision to be made, then there's no story there, right? He has to have a decision to make. With Walter, he could have made a different decision. He didn't have to decide to, a pretty wild decision actually, right? To decide to become a drug dealer. So there were other things that he could have done, but he made the decision. So the initial change that happens, the character does not choose, but the first decision that he makes, the first choice that he has to make, is all on the character. The character decides to move forward in this way. Okay, so make sure that the character has a choice, that you show what are the decisions that this character can make. He has to think of a few things. If he has no choice, then there's no decision for him to make. Okay, it's just him being taken over by the change. Still, there has to be a point when the change that is happening ends, and the character has to make a choice, has to make a decision of what to do next. All right, now the next thing that we talked about were the action steps, right? So now the character has made a decision. He has to take a number of action steps that are going to lead to this transformation that at the end of the book. So what are the action steps that Walter takes in Breaking Bad? Well, once he decides that he's going to do this, then, like we said, he does a number of things, right? He first tracks down the kid that is selling drugs and wants to learn. He has to learn about how to create these. Now he's a chemist, so he understands how these chemicals react and how to put them back together. But he has to learn, like, where is he going to get all the raw materials to make these drugs? How is he going to, he's going to meet clients. He gets himself a lab, which is a moving trailer. He learns to hide money and be secretive. And during all this time, he's meeting people and he's becoming wiser and more vicious. And these are all the outside things. These are the things that the viewer sees, right? The viewer is able to watch all this stuff happen. And that's your plot, and that's a story. However, what else is happening as he's taking these action steps is that he's changing. He is becoming more vicious. He is becoming more of a criminal. He's learning all these things, but he's changing internally. So the things that he is doing, he wouldn't have done at the beginning of the story, because he just wasn't that kind of person. But every action that he takes changes him and he becomes a new kind of person, so that by the end of that story, at the end of all of the multiple seasons, he's a completely different person than he was at the beginning of the story. So all these action steps have to lead to transformation. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to create a bunch of action in your novel that leads to nothing. So all the things that are happening, all the scenes that you're creating, all these action scenes that you're creating, should be changing the character as well. So it's not just the physical stuff, it's also like, how is this character, how is this scene and this stuff that is happening changing your character? You have to keep that in mind, because that is our goal. Our goal is that we are transforming this character into a different kind of person by the end of the book. All right, if this is helpful, I want to take just a moment to remind you to please like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please share it with people that you think might be interested in learning how to write, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Okay, so let's move on now. What I want to mention is that transformation takes time. This is why we're slowly moving through, the decisions and the multiple action steps, and then maybe a new decision and more action steps. Because what you want to do is you want to show that it's slowly happening. It's not something that happens overnight. The character usually resists it, and then it's not a steady, it's not a steady move towards transformation. The character could fall back and become more of who he originally was, right? So it's not always that he's just slowly moving. There's setbacks, and then the character decides not to. So if the character is fearful at the beginning of a story, he could slowly start to become more courageous, but something could happen that could make him afraid again, and then he takes a step back and doesn't want to move forward. So one of the things you need to do is think about this, like it's not just a steady action all the way to the top, right? So a lot of times our plotting goes like this because it's going up and down, but it's slowly going up, it's slowly moving forward, but there are setbacks, and the readers like that because it's, the character is human, and we want to see that. We want to see that the transformation doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in real life. When we transform, when we grow as humans into something better, usually it takes some time for us to do that. Sometimes we have to learn our lessons a lot of times before we really do change into something better and transform ourselves. And the same thing is true for your character. You need to make sure that the character is transforming over time through these different actions that you are creating. So what you want to remember is that writing, I think that's part of the joy of writing, is that we get to transform our characters. We get to create these characters that are going on this journey and that are changing and becoming a different kind of person. And again, even with something where he transformed in a bad way, right? It wasn't a positive in that show. He actually becomes a worse person than who he was at the beginning. If you're telling the story in an interesting way, the reader is still going to enjoy that. So it doesn't always have to be a positive transformation. Most of the ones that books that we write and we read, you will see that it is a positive transformation. The character has grown and become something new. And again, that is the joy of writing, is being able to create this journey and show the change. And that's the fun of writing to me, right? And it's the fun of life as well, that we are constantly changing and growing and becoming something hopefully better than we were yesterday. So I hope that this has been helpful. Again, if you did enjoy it, please hit the like and the share button, and I will see you again next Friday for my next writing tip.